The first sign that my marriage was over wasn't a fight. It wasn't another woman. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a hydrangea bush, overgrown, browning at the edges, standing where my husband used to stand every Saturday morning. I stepped out of the taxi at 4:17 in the afternoon. The Mediterranean sun was still trapped in my skin. My suitcase rolled behind me like a reluctant witness. And the first thing I saw, the very first thing, was the garden. Julian always kept those hydrangeas trimmed. Every Saturday morning, without fail, rain or shine, he'd be out there with those ridiculous oversized gardening gloves and a cup of black coffee balanced on the porch rail. He said the flowers reminded him of his grandmother's house in Savannah, the only place he ever felt safe as a child. So he tended to them like they were living memories, like if he stopped, some part of his past would die too. But now, the bushes were wild, overgrown, tangled into each other like they'd been abandoned weeks ago. Petals had browned at the edges and scattered across the walkway like confetti from a celebration no one attended. My heart stuttered. Then I looked at the porch. The lamp, the one Julian always left on for me, was dark. He kept that lamp burning every single night, not because he was afraid of the dark, because he said he never wanted me to walk into a house that wasn't glowing for me. That lamp was off, and suddenly the air felt different, heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. I walked up the stone path. The spare key was supposed to be tucked behind the loose brick near the porch light. I'd placed it there myself 3 years ago after locking myself out during a rainstorm. My fingers pried the brick loose. Nothing. Empty. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. He's upset, I told myself. He has every right to be. I pressed the doorbell and listened to it chime through what sounded like hollow rooms. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 5. 10. Nothing. No footsteps. No voice calling out from inside. No shadow moving behind the curtain. I lowered myself onto the top step, gripping the handle of my suitcase like it could anchor me to something real, and stared at the empty driveway. The spot where Julian always parked, parallel to the porch, same angle every single time, was bare. And that's when the first whisper of real fear curled through my chest. I told myself it was just a break, just some space. But the house didn't look like something on pause. It looked like something that had ended. Have you ever come home and realized that home had already left before you did? I didn't know it yet, sitting there on those cold porch steps with my vacation tan and my carry-on full of souvenirs nobody asked for. But the man who once told me he'd wait for me forever had finally stopped waiting. And by the time I understood what I'd truly lost, the only thing left of him was a letter. A letter that would shatter me into pieces I'm still trying to put back together. But before I tell you about that letter, and trust me, this one is going to stay with you long after this story ends, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a story from Infinite Love Tales by Mr. White. This channel is built on stories that remind us what love really costs and what it's really worth. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Julian and I had been married for 7 years. Not the kind of 7 that stories celebrate with renewed vows and tearful toasts and anniversary trips to places with white sand. Ours was the kind of 7 that settles into your bones like a low hum, always there, so constant you forget to hear it. So steady you mistake it for silence. He was a good man. And I don't say that the way people say it at funerals, generously, because there's nothing left to lose. I say it because it was the most fundamental truth of my life, and I spent years refusing to see it. Julian was the kind of man who made breakfast every Sunday morning. Not cereal, not toast, a full meal, eggs poached, not scrambled, because he learned early in our marriage that I preferred them that way, and he never once forgot. He'd set the plate in front of me with a glass of orange juice, the expensive kind, no pulp, because he noticed I always picked out the pulp from the cheap brand. And he'd sit across from me and ask about my week like he hadn't been living through it right beside me. He texted me every single time I left the house. Not "where are you?" Never controlling, never suspicious. Just, "home safe?" 2 words. Every time. Like clockwork, like breathing. He never raised his voice. Not once in 7 years. Never forgot our anniversary. Never missed a birthday. Not mine, not my mother's, not even my best friend's. He remembered allergies, preferences, shoe sizes of people he'd met twice. He carried the mental load of our entire life together and never once asked for credit. He learned to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. We didn't even have children yet. But one night I caught him in the bathroom, practicing French braids on a mannequin head he'd ordered online. When I asked him what he was doing, he shrugged and said, "For our daughter someday. I want to be ready." I laughed. I actually laughed at him, and he just smiled and went back to practicing, his thick fingers fumbling with the strands like they were threads of gold he was terrified of breaking. He left notes on the bathroom mirror in dry erase marker every morning. Small things. Sometimes just, "You're my favorite person." Sometimes, "You looked beautiful sleeping. Didn't want to wake you." I used to read them and smile. Then I used to read them and feel nothing. Then I started wiping them off before I even read them, annoyed by how easy it was for him to love me when I couldn't figure out how to love him back. He once drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to bring me my grandmother's quilt during my first year of grad school because I called him crying, saying I was homesick. 4 hours. Through ice and wind and near zero visibility. He showed up at my dorm at 2 a.m., snow in his hair, quilt under his arm, and said, "I brought your favorite blanket and 2 packs of those caramel candies you like. Which do you want first?" He proposed on a park bench at dusk. No flash mob, no helicopter, no stadium jumbotron. Just him and me and a ring he'd saved for quietly over 8 months. He said he chose a bench because he knew I'd hate a spectacle. He said he wanted the moment to be ours, not a performance for strangers. I said yes before he finished the sentence. That was Julian. Quiet, intentional, present. He loved in whispers, not shouts. And somehow, I grew deaf to all of it. I stopped reaching for his hand during movies, stopped leaning into him on the couch, stopped kissing him hello when I came through the door. I'd walk past him like he was furniture, like he was part of the house instead of the reason the house felt like home. I started resenting his availability, his patience, his grace. I wanted him to slam a door, to raise his voice, to show me something sharp, something unpredictable. But he never did. He just kept showing up, kept cooking, kept writing those mirror notes, kept asking, "How was your day?" with the same quiet sincerity he'd had since the day we met. He was everything I said I wanted, until he wasn't. Not because he changed, but because I did. Or maybe I didn't change at all. Maybe I just finally admitted I'd been running from stillness my entire life, and Julian was the stillest thing I'd ever known. His consistency didn't make me feel safe anymore. It made him invisible. The very traits that should have made me fall deeper, his reliability, his gentleness, his unwavering presence, became the things I resented most. I looked at him and saw predictability, routine, a life on repeat. I didn't see the man. I saw the pattern. And I wanted to break it. The idea didn't come from nowhere. It was planted, carefully, casually, by people I trusted. It started at brunch on a Sunday in late March. The kind of brunch where the mimosas flow too freely and the truths come loose like stitches from a hem you didn't know was unraveling. My friend Priya sat across from me, studying my face the way she always did, like she could read the parts of me I hadn't written yet. "You look tired," she said, and not the way you say it when someone didn't sleep well. She meant something deeper, not sleep tired, soul tired. I should have deflected, should have said I was fine. Instead, I set my glass down and admitted something I hadn't even admitted to myself. I don't know who I am anymore, outside of him, outside of us. I feel like I've been living inside someone else's life for 7 years. That was the crack, and everyone at the table leaned into it. My friend Vanessa, freshly divorced, newly liberated as she called it, pointed her fork at me. "You went from a dorm room to a wedding venue. You skipped the most important chapter of your life, the one where you figure out who you are without someone else defining it." And then Kira, the dangerous one, the one who always said the thing you wanted to hear but shouldn't, leaned in with that conspiratorial smile and whispered, "He's too available, Mara. That's your problem. He's always there, always agreeable, always sweet. No wonder you're restless. You need friction. You need to feel something that isn't comfortable." I sat there, absorbing it all, knowing I should defend Julian, knowing I should say, "He's not the problem. I am," but I didn't. My silence was the first betrayal, the first brick I removed from the foundation of our marriage, and I didn't even hear it hit the ground. Priya, to her credit, was gentler. She didn't attack Julian. She just made a suggestion that sounded like medicine. "Go somewhere, alone, not a couple's retreat, Not therapy, just you, Mara. Take a week or two, reconnect with yourself. Remember what it feels like to exist without being someone's wife. She made it sound noble, brave, like leaving the man who loved me unconditionally was an act of self-discovery rather than self-destruction. That night I lay in bed next to Julian while he slept, his breathing steady, one hand resting on my hip the way it always did, and I opened my phone and searched flights. The Amalfi Coast, 2 weeks. Solo. The price was steep. I booked it without blinking, without consulting him, without even pausing to consider what it would mean. The moment I confirmed the reservation, something surged through my chest. Adrenaline mixed with guilt, a cocktail I mistook for excitement. It felt like stepping off a ledge. I hadn't hit the ground yet, so I mistook the falling for flying. The most dangerous advice is the kind that tells you exactly what you already want to hear, and I had surrounded myself with people who handed me matches and called it self-care. I told Julian 3 days before my flight. We were sitting at the kitchen table. He'd made risotto, the mushroom kind, from scratch, the recipe he'd learned from an Italian cooking channel, because I once mentioned I loved risotto at a restaurant, and he wanted to make it better at home. He always did that. Took the small things I said and turned them into acts of love so quiet I didn't even register them. I pushed the rice around my plate. Couldn't meet his eyes. I need some time, I said. Alone, away, to figure things out. He set his fork down slowly. The clink of metal against ceramic was the loudest sound in the room. A long pause followed, the kind that stretches time, that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I braced myself for the questions, the interrogation, the bargaining. It never came. He looked at me with those dark, searching eyes, the ones that had been reading me for 7 years. That knew when I was lying before I did, and said, simply, "If that's what you need, I'll be here." And something about that sentence, so gentle, so certain, so impossibly selfless, made me furious. Not at him, at myself, because I wanted him to fight. I wanted him to slam his fist on the table and say, "No, you don't get to walk out on this. We fix this together." I wanted resistance, passion, proof that losing me would break him. But he just loved me, quietly, completely, and I hated him for making it so easy to walk away. The night before my flight, he held me in bed longer than usual. We lay in the dark, his arms wrapped around my waist from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. I could feel his heartbeat against my back, steady, like a metronome, like everything else about him. His breath was warm against my neck when he whispered 4 words I'll hear for the rest of my life. "Come back to me." I didn't answer. I just closed my eyes and let the silence fill the space where my reassurance should have been. At 6 a.m., sitting in the airport terminal with my boarding pass in one hand and my phone in the other, I did the thing I'd been telling myself was necessary. The thing that, in my head, was practical, protective, temporary. I blocked him. His phone number, blocked. WhatsApp, blocked. Instagram, blocked. Email, blocked. One by one. Methodical, surgical. Like I was deactivating an alarm system so I could move through the world without its noise. It took less than 2 minutes to sever every digital thread connecting me to the man I married. But before I blocked the last one, I saw his final message. Sent at 5:42 a.m., which meant he'd been awake. He'd felt me leave the bed. He'd heard the front door close, and instead of chasing me, instead of calling, instead of driving to the airport and begging me to stay, he sent this. "I love you. That hasn't changed. Please don't disappear." I read it once. My throat tightened. I read it twice. My vision blurred. Then I deleted the entire conversation, not because the words didn't matter, because they mattered too much, and I wasn't strong enough to carry them where I was going. Then I did something I still can't fully explain. I went into my phone settings and set a random password on my blocking restrictions, a string of numbers I deliberately chose not to memorize. I locked myself out of being able to undo what I'd done. I welded the door shut from the inside. I told myself it was a pause, but pauses don't require padlocks. Pauses don't require you to destroy every bridge so you won't be tempted to walk back across. I ordered a mimosa at the airport lounge, put in my earbuds, and boarded a plane to Italy. And I left the best man I've ever known standing in an empty house, holding a phone full of silence, wondering what he did wrong. Italy opened its arms to me like a lover who doesn't ask questions. The Amalfi Coast was absurd in its beauty, almost offensively gorgeous, as if the landscape itself was designed to make you forget every responsibility you'd ever carried. Cliffs draped in lemon groves tumbled toward water so blue it looked digitally enhanced. Villages stacked like pastel-colored dreams against the hillside, pink, terracotta, sun-bleached gold. Positano unfolded beneath my hotel terrace like a painting someone had spilled into reality. For the first 3 days, I let myself believe this was the answer. I wandered cobblestone streets without a schedule, without a destination, without anyone asking where I was going or when I'd be back. I ate fresh pasta at tiny family-run trattorias where the owner kissed my hand and called me Bella like it was my birth name. I drank limoncello on rooftops while the sun melted into the Tyrrhenian Sea, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet that made my chest ache with something close to joy. I wore linen dresses and let the salt air tangle my hair and felt, for the first time in years, like I existed outside the margins of someone else's life. I wasn't somebody's wife. I wasn't the woman at the kitchen table pushing risotto around her plate. I was just Mara, unattached, unburdened, unnamed. It was intoxicating. On the third evening, I found a bar carved into the cliffside, one of those places with candlelit tables overlooking the sea and music drifting from somewhere you can't quite locate. A man with green eyes and sun-weathered skin was sitting at the bar. He was a photographer from Lyon, charming in that unserious European way that suggests a man who lives in motion and has never once worried about a mortgage. His name was Dominic. He bought me a glass of Nero d'Avola without asking and told me I had the saddest smile he'd ever seen. We talked until the candles burned low. He told me about shooting landscapes in Patagonia, sleeping in his van in the Swiss Alps, chasing light across 3 continents like it was a lover who kept leaving. And when the wine was gone and the night had turned velvet around us, he leaned close enough that I could smell salt and cedar on his skin, and I felt the gravitational pull of possibility. His lips were inches from mine. My body leaned in before my mind caught up. And then I saw Julian, not physically, not a hallucination, but an image, so sharp, so uninvited, so violently vivid, that it stopped me mid-breath. Julian standing in our kitchen, drying dishes with that faded blue towel, humming some old Motown song off-key. Julian assembling that reading nook at midnight because I mentioned wanting one in passing and he treated every small wish of mine like a blueprint. Julian crying silently at our wedding, his hand trembling as he slid the ring on my finger, whispering, "I've been waiting for you my whole life." The distance between my lips and this stranger's mouth suddenly felt like the distance between who I was and who I was pretending to be. I pulled back, mumbled an apology, walked home along the cliffside path in the dark, the Mediterranean wind sharp against my cheeks, and felt the first crack in the armor I'd built around my guilt. It was small, hairline, almost invisible, but it was there, and it was spreading. By day 4, the fantasy collapsed. Same sun, same sea, same postcard-perfect coastline, but everything tasted different. The limoncello was too sweet. The pasta sat heavy in my stomach. The sunsets I'd been photographing like trophies suddenly looked ordinary, just light doing what light does, with no one beside me to say, "Look at that." I started waking up with a knot in my stomach, a tight, sour thing that no amount of espresso or ocean air could dissolve. And the triggers were everywhere. I saw a couple sharing gelato on a bench, the man holding the cup while the woman took the first bite, and I thought of Julian, who always gave me the first taste of everything. Every dessert, every new recipe, every cup of soup he was testing. "You first," he'd say. "Your opinion is the only one I trust." I watched a husband applying sunscreen to his wife's shoulders on the beach, his hands careful, unhurried, and I remember Julian doing the same thing on a vacation to the Outer Banks 3 years ago. How his fingers lingered on my skin, how he kissed my shoulder after and said, "Can't have you burning, I need you forever." I saw 2 people arguing passionately in Italian, hands flying, voices rising, and then collapsing into laughter and an embrace. And I realized I would have given anything, everything, to be arguing with Julian in that moment, to hear his voice, to feel the friction I'd been so desperate for. But it was the dreams that truly broke me. Every night he came to me. Not the flat, predictable version I'd convinced myself I was tired of. The real Julian. The man who held my hair when I was sick and didn't flinch. Who sang badly in the car just to make me laugh. Who once stayed up until 3 a.m. on a work night because I couldn't sleep and he refused to let me be awake alone. "If you're up," he said, "I'm up. That's the deal." On day 5, I woke at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, heart slamming against my ribs from a dream so vivid it felt like a premonition. In the dream, I came home and the house was empty. Not just Julian gone empty, completely empty. No furniture, no photographs, no trace of the life we'd built. Just four walls and silence so thick it had texture. I reached for my phone instinctively, wanting to call him, needing to hear his voice say my name the way he always did, like it was the only word in his vocabulary that mattered. But I'd blocked him, and the password I'd set to lock the blocking settings, I'd chosen it specifically so I wouldn't remember. I had sealed myself inside my own silence. I sat on the edge of that hotel bed, phone clutched in both hands, shaking, and realized I'd done something I couldn't undo from 5,000 miles away. That afternoon, I messaged Priya. "Have you heard from Julian?" Her reply came 20 minutes later. 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. "Mara, where have you been?" "He's been a wreck. His brother Leo called me last week. He said Julian hasn't eaten in days. Just sits in the house waiting for you to call, checking his phone constantly. He's not sleeping." My fingers trembled as I typed back. Then she sent a second message. "But that was days ago. Leo called me again yesterday. He said something changed. Julian's different now. He's not waiting anymore." The ground beneath me tilted. The walls of the hotel room contracted. I typed back 3 words that barely made it through my shaking hands. "What does that mean?" Priya's response was a single line. "I don't know." But Leo sounded scared. I spent the remaining days in Italy like a ghost haunting someone else's vacation. The coast's beauty became a cruelty, a paradise I hadn't earned and didn't deserve. I changed my flight, moved it up by 2 days, and packed my suitcase with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. On the plane home, I rehearsed what I would say. "I'm sorry. I was selfish. I was afraid. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed without running away from everything I already had." I practiced the words until they felt true, until I believed they could reach him, until I convinced myself, desperately, foolishly, that the door was still open. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever realized too late what you had? And while you're at it, hit that like button. It helps more people find stories like this. Now, let me tell you what I came home to. The taxi, the overgrown hydrangeas, the dark windows, the missing key. You already know this part. You were there with me on those porch steps, staring at a house that looked like it had given up. But now you understand why. Now you know what I did to earn this silence. After 10 minutes of ringing a doorbell no one would answer, I remembered the laundry room window, the one that never latched properly. Julian had said for years he'd fix it. He never did. And standing there in the fading afternoon light, I wondered if some part of him always knew I'd need a way back in. I climbed through, landed awkwardly on the tile floor, stood up, and the silence hit me like a wall. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind I'd craved in Italy. Spacious, liberating. This was the other kind. The kind that presses in on your chest and makes the walls feel too wide. The kind that tells you something living used to be here, and now it's not. The living room looked untouched. Same couch, same throw pillows, same stack of novels on the side table that neither of us had finished. But the air was stale, heavy, like the house had stopped breathing days ago, and no one had bothered to resuscitate it. I walked to the bedroom, and that's where truth hit me in the chest like a closed fist. His side of the closet, empty. The wooden hangers he insisted on using because he said wire hangers ruined the shoulders of his shirts, gone. Every single one. The bottom drawer where he kept his running shoes and old college sweatshirts, cleared out. The nightstand where he placed his watch, his wallet, and a glass of water every night before bed, bare, except for a thin layer of dust that told me exactly how many days he'd been gone. No note on the dresser, no voicemail waiting on the landline, no text hiding behind the block screen, just the shape of a man who had been there, and then wasn't, like someone had erased him from the room but left the outline. I stood in that doorway, my suitcase still in the hallway, my carry-on still on my shoulder, and felt my legs go hollow. I stumbled outside. I don't even remember deciding to go outside. My body just moved, through the kitchen, out the back door, onto the porch. And there, across the low fence that separated our yard from the neighbors, was Mrs. Calloway, 83 years old, watering her roses the way she did every evening. She looked up and saw me, and the expression on her face, it wasn't surprise, it wasn't relief, it was pity, the kind you give someone who doesn't know yet how bad it is. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "You're back. Where is he? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. She set down her watering can slowly. He waited, you know. Every evening he was out here on this porch, just sitting, watching the street. I brought him pie twice, the pecan kind he likes. The first time he thanked me and barely ate a bite. The second time, she paused. He didn't even answer the door. I gripped the porch railing. Then one morning, maybe 5-6 days ago, I looked out my window and saw him loading boxes into his car, moving slowly, like he was underwater. He looked hollow, Mara, like someone had scooped him out from the inside and left just the shell. She looked at me with eyes that had seen 70 years of marriages, some saved, some lost, and said the thing that I will carry to my grave. That man loved you like you were the last good thing in the world. I hope wherever he's gone, he finds someone who makes him feel the same. She picked up her watering can and turned back to her roses. And I stood there on my porch, surrounded by neighbors who had witnessed my destruction, and realized that the whole street had watched me break a good man's heart from 5,000 miles away. I called Leo that night. He picked up on the second ring. His voice carried the kind of controlled calm that only comes from rehearsing what you're going to say, like he'd been waiting for this call and had already decided exactly how much truth I deserved. He's gone, Mara. What do you mean gone? Gone where? A pause, the kind that's louder than words. He resigned from the firm, sold what he could, left 5 days ago. He told me he couldn't stay in a house that still smelled like someone who chose to leave. I didn't leave him. But the words crumbled before they even cleared my lips, because we both knew that's exactly what I did. I just did it from a coastal terrace with a glass of wine in my hand and called it self-care. Let me tell you what those 13 days looked like from his side, Leo said, and his voice dropped, not with anger, but with something worse. Grief. He checked his phone 400 times a day. I'm not exaggerating. I watched him do it. Every few minutes he'd pick it up, stare at the screen, put it down, pick it up again. He called your number knowing it would go straight to voicemail, just to hear your recorded voice. That was all he had, Mara. A 30-second voicemail greeting. That was the only version of you he could reach. I pressed my hand against my mouth. He sat on that porch every single evening, watching the street, not moving, not eating, just watching, like a man waiting for a train he wasn't sure was coming. He called me every night, and asked the same questions. Has she reached out? Has she called anyone? Is she okay? Do you think something happened to her? Leo's voice thinned. He wasn't angry, Mara. That's the part that killed me. He wasn't cursing your name. He wasn't throwing things. He was terrified. Terrified that the person he built his entire life around had erased him without a word. He thought something might have happened to you. He almost called the police. I couldn't breathe. And then something broke. I don't know what day. I don't know what hour. But when I went to check on him last week, he was different. Not his usual quiet, because Julian's always been quiet. This was different. Empty quiet. Like the lights were still on, but nobody was home anymore. Leo exhaled. He looked at me and said, she made her choice. Now I have to make mine. He started packing that night. Didn't say where he was going. Didn't leave a forwarding address. I asked him if he wanted me to tell you anything when you came back. What did he say? Silence. Then, he said, she'll figure it out. Leo's final words came slowly, like he was placing each one down with deliberate weight. He didn't leave because he stopped loving you, Mara. He left because he realized that loving you was destroying him. And the saddest part, even while he was packing, even while he was walking out the door of the house he built for both of you, he left something behind. An envelope, at my place, for you. I mailed it this morning. The line went dead. I stood in our bedroom, his bedroom, my bedroom, nobody's bedroom, holding the phone against my ear long after the call ended. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, and I didn't recognize her. The next morning, I opened our joint bank account. I hadn't looked at it since before the trip. Hadn't thought about it. Money was the furthest thing from my mind when I was sipping limoncello on rooftops and pretending my life wasn't disintegrating. But now, sitting at the kitchen table in a house that echoed with absence, I opened the app and scrolled through the details. Everything was there. Every dollar. Every cent. But when I looked closer, I saw what he'd done. Julian had transferred his entire half, every paycheck, every savings contribution, 7 years of earning and building, into my name. All of it. Sitting in the account with my name on it like severance pay for a marriage I had terminated. He didn't take a single cent. I set the phone down and walked through the house. Slowly, room by room, cataloging what he left behind like an archaeologist documenting ruins, the furniture, all of it. The couch he picked out because I said I liked the color. The dining table we bought together at that antique market in Vermont. The reading nook, the one he built at midnight by hand with wood he'd selected himself, because I mentioned once in passing that I wished I had a quiet corner to read in. He heard that. He always heard the small things. The framed photograph of us at Lake Whitmore still hung in the hallway, slightly crooked, the way it always was because the nail was too small and neither of us ever got around to fixing it. In the photo we were laughing, genuinely laughing, his arm around my shoulders, my head tilted back, the lake shimmering behind us. He once told me it was his most prized possession. Not the frame, not the lake, just the proof that we were happy once. He left it hanging, the fan on my side of the bed, still plugged in. He knew I couldn't sleep without it, even in winter. He never complained about the cold. And even as he packed his entire life into boxes and walked out the door, he left that fan where it was. He took nothing. Nothing except himself. And that was the only thing I ever needed. If you're feeling what I'm feeling right now, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we don't realize what we have until we're staring at an empty closet and a bank account full of someone else's generosity. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what comes next. Now, the letter. This is the part I still can't read without breaking. The envelope arrived 2 days later. No return address. Just my name on the front, Mara, written in Julian's careful, measured handwriting. The kind of penmanship that belonged to another era. Each letter formed with the same intentionality he brought to everything, deliberate, unhurried, precise, cream-colored stationery. The ink was dark blue, the kind from the fountain pen I'd given him on our 3rd anniversary. He used it for everything important. Birthday cards, thank you notes, the vows he wrote for our wedding that he kept folded in his nightstand drawer. He always said that important words deserved to be written by hand, with ink that doesn't fade. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Turned it over in my hands, pressed it against my chest, brought it to my nose, and caught the faintest trace of cedar. His drawer liner. The one he installed last spring because he said it kept the moths away, but I think he just liked how it made everything smell like the forest. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I told him I was leaving, the same chair, and I opened the letter. It was a single page, front and back. His handwriting, neat, careful, filled every line. No margins wasted, no words crossed out. He'd thought about every sentence before the pen touched the paper. Just like him. Mara, I'm not writing this to make you feel guilty. You'll do that on your own, and I wouldn't wish it on you. I'm writing because I owe you honesty, even if you couldn't give me the same. I waited. I want you to know that. Not because I'm trying to make you feel worse, but because I need you to understand what those 13 days felt like from this side of the silence. I checked my phone constantly, hundreds of times a day. I called your number knowing it would go straight to voicemail, just to hear your voice. That recording became my lifeline. 30 seconds of you saying, leave a message. I listened to it so many times I started hearing things in your tone that probably weren't there. Warmth, apology, a secret code that meant, I'm coming back. I sat on the porch every evening and watched the street. I told myself you'd just appear. No call. No warning. The way you used to come home from work and kick off your shoes by the door and say, what smells good? Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like coming home to me was something you never had to think about. I lived for that moment every day. And for 13 days, it never came. I replayed every conversation, every argument, every silence, trying to find the moment I lost you. Was it the way I never pushed back? The way I made things too easy? Did you need a man who challenged you? And I gave you one who just loved you. I've asked myself these questions so many times the words have lost their shape. I know I'm not exciting, Mara. I know I'm not the kind of man who makes your pulse race or keeps you guessing. I don't have dramatic gestures or grand speeches. I have Sunday breakfasts. I have dry erase markers. I have a reading nook I built with my own hands because you once said, once in passing, that you wish you had one. That's how I love. Quietly, consistently. In the small spaces where no one is watching. And I thought, I really, truly thought, that would be enough. But you blocked me to find yourself. And in doing that, you told me something I couldn't unhear, that finding yourself required my absence. That I was the noise you needed silence from. That the life I built for us, Every breakfast, every note, every late-night conversation, every time I held you when you cried was something you needed to escape. I can't be someone's noise. I don't hate you. I don't think I'm capable of that. You are woven into every good memory I have. You are the reason I learned to cook, learned to braid, learned to be someone worth coming home to. But I can't be the man sitting on the porch anymore, waiting for someone who had to erase me just to breathe. I hope you found what you were looking for. I hope the air was clean and the water was warm and the sky gave you whatever I couldn't. I hope the silence was everything you needed it to be. I'm going to try to find those things for myself now. Yours, once, Julian. I read it 4 times. The first time, scanning, breathless, eyes running ahead of comprehension. The second time, slower, each word landing like a stone dropped into still water. The tears started here. The third time, the sobs came. Not the pretty kind. Not the kind you see in movies. The kind that distorts your face, that comes from somewhere below your stomach, that makes you grip the edge of the table because your body doesn't feel strong enough to hold itself upright. The fourth time, I pressed the letter to my chest and rocked forward, and the sound that came out of me wasn't crying. It was something older, something deeper, something animal and ancient and broken. It was the sound of a woman realizing she'd burned down her own house and called it renovation. In the weeks that followed, I learned what absence really means, not the kind I'd craved, the liberating, luxurious kind where you stretch into your own space and feel your edges expand. That was a fantasy, a brochure version of loneliness. The real kind follows you from room to room. It turns a home into a museum of things someone used to touch. It sits in the chair across from you at dinner. It sleeps on the other side of the bed. It waits in every small, ordinary moment that used to be shared and is now endured. I'd open the refrigerator and find the last bottle of orange juice, the expensive kind, no pulp, and stand there staring at it until the cold air made me shiver. Because no one was going to buy the next one. No one was going to remember. The reading nook sat untouched. I tried sitting in it once, lowered myself into the chair he'd built, ran my fingers along the armrest he'd sanded smooth, and lasted 45 seconds before the tears came. I could feel his hands in the wood, his patience, his love for a woman who hadn't even thanked him. I left the fan running every night, even though I was cold, even though the sound now reminded me of everything it used to drown out, his breathing, his warmth, his presence. Turning it off felt like erasing another piece of him. And I'd erased enough. I searched for him. Quietly, obsessively, pathetically. I scrolled through every social media platform, every people finder website, every digital corner of the internet looking for a trace, a sign, proof that he still existed somewhere in the world. And then I found it. A mutual friend mentioned a tagged photo. I clicked through 3 accounts to reach it, hands shaking, heart in my throat. And there he was, Julian, standing on a cliff top somewhere coastal, I couldn't tell where, his arms folded across his chest, the ocean sprawling behind him. The wind was in his hair. The sunlight painted his face in gold. And he was smiling. Not his polite, measured smile, the one he used at dinner parties and work events. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. The kind I hadn't seen in the last 2 years of our marriage. Next to him stood a woman I didn't recognize. The caption mentioned something about healing retreats and new beginnings, and I felt my stomach fold in on itself. Not because he'd moved on, it was too soon for that probably, but because of how he looked, peaceful, at rest, unburdened. He looked like a man who had finally set down something impossibly heavy, and I realized with devastating clarity that the heavy thing was me. I hadn't been his peace. I'd been his storm, and he'd finally walked out of the rain. I wanted to be angry. Anger would have been easier, a fire I could feed, a direction I could point my pain, but there was no anger to find. Only the quiet, crushing recognition that I'd held something irreplaceable in my hands and set it down because I was too distracted by the horizon to see what was right in front of me. One afternoon, I went to the garden. The hydrangeas were still wild, overgrown and tangled, some of the bushes browning badly. I found Julian's gardening gloves in the shed, pulled them on and picked up the shears. I'd watched him do this 100 times. It couldn't be that hard. I cut too deep. 2 of the bushes, the oldest ones, the ones closest to the porch, haven't bloomed since. Isn't that something? I sit on the porch now, Julian's spot. Some evenings, when the light is fading and the street goes quiet, I lower myself into the chair where he used to wait for me, and I watch the sky drain from blue to amber to black. I think about what I'd say if he ever came back. I've rehearsed it 1,000 times. 10,000. The words change, but the core stays the same. I was wrong. I was afraid. I didn't know how to hold happiness without suspecting it. I didn't know how to love someone steady without mistaking their steadiness for indifference. I didn't know that the most extraordinary love often looks ordinary, that it lives in Sunday breakfasts and dry erase markers and 4-hour drives through snowstorms, that it doesn't announce itself. It just stays, but the words feel small, too small against the size of what I lost. Julian didn't disappear because he stopped caring. He disappeared because I taught him that caring wasn't enough, that devotion could be boring, that love, when it's too steady, too reliable, too present, becomes invisible. I made the most attentive man I've ever known feel like he wasn't even in the room. I made him invisible. And now, he's the only thing I see. I keep thinking about something he wrote in that letter. One line that plays on a loop in my mind like a song I can't turn off. I can't be someone's noise. He wasn't noise. He was never noise. He was the quietest, most beautiful music I'd ever heard. And I turned the volume down so low that I forgot it was playing, until the room went silent and all that was left was the ringing in my ears. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he thinks about me. I don't know if the woman in that photograph makes him poached eggs or leaves notes on his mirror or sits beside him on a porch in some town I'll never find. But I hope, with every fractured, guilty, aching piece of my heart, that wherever he is, he feels seen, that someone is reading his quiet love like the language it always was, that he never, ever has to sit on a porch again, waiting for someone who chose to disappear. The hydrangeas are growing wild. I tried to tend them the way he used to, but I don't have his hands. I don't have his patience. I don't have his way of knowing exactly how much to cut and how much to leave. You spend years watching someone tend to beautiful things, and you never learn how they did it until they're gone, and the garden has no one left to keep it alive. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you might be taking for granted, or someone who's been quietly sitting on the porch waiting for you to notice, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done differently. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it before it's too late. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Infinite Love Tales by Mr. White. Every story I tell here is meant to remind us of something we already know but keep forgetting. That love, real love, isn't loud. It's the quiet hand that's always there, until it isn't. I'll see you in the next one.